Do milestones chapters matter in Kengan Omega? That's the question we're going to be asking and answering today. And so we'll be looking at a few chapters. Now, if you're not aware of what a milestone chapter is, it's usually a whole number chapter that has some pretty big events happening in it. So a chapter 100 of said series will have something huge happening. Now, is this true for Kengan Omega? Currently, they're around a little over 200 chapters. So I think we are in the position to where we can actually look at enough milestone chapters to see if anything major happens to come to a relatively solid conclusion. And so the milestone gap between chapters will be around 50, mainly because there's, like I said again, 200 chapters, and 50 is a whole number and a pretty substantial amount of chapters, you know, in between. So let's start off with chapter 0 or chapter 1. It really doesn't matter. This would kind of qualify as a milestone chapter, the main reason being it introduces, you know, Koga and Ryuki. I think it's a no-brainer, to be completely honest. So yeah, the easiest one, chapter 0 and chapter 1, whichever one you pick, both of them are incredibly important to the series. And so we go into the next chapter, and that is chapter 50. Now, if you are a Kengan fan, there is no way you heard chapter 50 and not know what happens in this chapter. Chapter 50 is, I've said it before in this channel, one of the greatest chapters in Kengan Omega thus far. The return of Oma and Ryan. It was epic. Nothing, I don't even think anything compares thus far. Look, I like Kengan Omega, don't get me wrong, but that chapter is absolutely insane. From the tension that was building up from Zaiji trying to assassinate Yamashita, to Koga and him struggling against Zaiji's students, all the way to Ryan coming back and that final double page spread that was colored. Ooh, yeah, milestone chapter, easy, right? Next is chapter 100. This one is gonna be a bit more controversial, mainly because it is in the fight between Joruta and the clone of Masaki. I'm not too sure if his name is Masaki. I like calling him Boy M. So here's the thing, this might not seem as a milestone chapter. It's in the middle of a fight. It does go into Jotara's reasons for fighting, and it has one of the most important quotes in the series, in my opinion. And if you've watched my video on Kuroki's Darkest Secret, which I recommend, then this chapter does hold a lot of significance. However, that's the agenda speaking. It's one thing to have a theory, but it's not necessarily apparent. At least I don't think it would be apparent to the normal viewer who would, you know, get to chapter 100 and think of something big and it's just, you know, the same old, you know, Jotara versus Boy M. So this one is probably going to be the most controversial one out of all of them, if you're going to say it's like a milestone chapter. So it's going to be a bit tough justifying this one. The next is 150, and 150 is the raid of Akoya, Setsuna, and Ryuki on the worms. And for Akoya fans, this is probably when the Akoya stocks began to plummet hard, because here Sutsuna and even Akoya himself starts hinting towards the fact that he might be getting weaker. Now, doesn't seem like it's that important, right? Like, alright, they're killing worm members, and Lutien is there as well, but no one really cares that much about him. However, there is the foreshadowing of Akoya possibly making Ryuki his successor. That should get your attention, especially when it comes within the context of chapter 200, which is the last chapter here. But I might end up making a video on this, because I do think that there's a lot of big hints on the character of the Omega and what type of person they're supposed to be, and maybe even the future of Ryuki, right? So yeah, I think it does definitely clear the bar as a milestone chapter, mainly because the Akoya stands, you know, take a massive L in their stocks, but also the fact that, of course, Akoya kind of sees Ryuki as his successor in this chapter, whereas, you know, previously he thought like Ryuki would be a pretty good partner. So that's a pretty substantial change in attitude. The last chapter that we'll be looking at is chapter 200. Now, this one I think is very important. Whereas you would think I'm stretching, you know, the limits of what a milestone chapter is with the Joruta and Akoya chapters, so chapter 100 and 150. Here, it's definitely focused a lot more on the inside. We're in the inside, like it's an important spot in the series. But we also get to hear Retsudo and Ryo talk about Koga for a bit, you know, something special about Koga, right? So this is definitely, of course, giving us hints towards future stuff in the series, you know, kind of preparing us for what might be the character component or character significance of Koga within the Kengan verse. But also, Oma chooses Koga as his successor of the Nico style, which is big because this means that, you know, Oma will more than likely teach Koga Demon's Bane, which is crazy. And it also has a lot of potential because, again, Koga is extremely talented. What Koga will do with the Nico style, if he is the next successor, will be something that even Faye, who was built different, everyone knows this man was built different, even he won't be able to measure up to what Koga is doing or what he will do. Now, do I think this man is gonna have, the advance? I have my doubts on that. I'm gonna be honest. I think he already has the fist eye, which is broken enough as is. So for some people, I do know it stings that some people think that, you know, Koga learning the Nico style, oh my god. But this is clearly a milestone chapter. That's the point of this one. And look, in conclusion, I think it's fairly obvious that the milestone chapters at least hold a good amount of significance in terms of like the story beats. They may not be as big and as bombastic as, like, for example, I read One Piece, and milestone chapters for One Piece are usually huge. Like, they break the series at some points. But Kengan Omega is a lot less bombastic in terms of how it implements its milestone chapters. However, they're all still important nevertheless. And and yeah, that's about it. Yeah, it's a quick video. Yes, there's no real script. I kind of did it off the bat with very little preparation, but it is a pretty interesting question to answer nevertheless. And so if you like the video, like, sub, all that fun stuff, and yeah, take it easy.